Hello and welcome to another video from the only channel that you need to not only survive the current apocalypse but actually enjoy. And today's video is going to be he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. It sounds like I'm going to give a church talk, but you know me a little bit better than that. Anyways, a while back, and I'm talking about like 4 years ago, a radio station out west contacted me wanting to do an interview with me because my YouTube channel was kind of popular back then. And I agreed to it, and they were asking me about that scripture, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. And they told me in advance what it was going to be about, but I didn't really write any notes. I just kind of went along with the interview because I had in my head what I wanted to talk about. But that's what I'm going to talk about today. And in fact, when I did the interview, I thought, well, now that that's fresh in my head, I need to go out and make a regular video with a script and everything. But I never did it. And I guess that if I just keep planning that, I never will do it. But one of the things I thought at the time was it would be nice to get a hold of a Roman sword so I could use that in the video. And people could have that visual image while I'm talking, because that's always a good learning tool or a good memorization tool. So here it is. A Roman sword. I know it looks like a machete, and in fact, that's what people use them for. It's for, like, you know, cutting brush, and in fact, that's how I got this. Some friends came down to hate messing with this thing. The guy's like a knife guy, so as soon as I touched it, I knew it was dangerous. You know, people that are knife guys, that no matter what they own, they always sharpen it so you can shave with it, and I don't shave. But anyway, these people came down to help me with my brushing. He had this to help cut brush, and I told him about the fact that that's a Roman sword. And so when he left this at my house with a whole pile of money stuffed in the sheath. So I'm going to explain to you why I say that this is a Roman sword. If you saw the shape, it's not like a regular shape of a machete. It's got this hump on it here. Well, for some reason, apparently, that has a lot of benefits. I tried to do a little research on it, and sure enough, people are saying, oh, you know, it's best for, you know, hand-to-hand combat, and plus you could use it for other things. But they all have different names. Like every culture has a different name for this. In Roman times, or when Jesus was on the earth, the word that's used at that verse is makeda. Makeda is what's translated as sword. When Jesus said, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, what he said was, he who lives by the makeda dies by the makeda. And the important thing about that is that word, makeda, is Strong's G3162. It's formed from the word mache, Strong's 3163, which is where we get our word match, because mache and match mean the same thing, just like wrestling match, boxing match, or machete match. And a machete match is basically what those Roman gladiators got into when they were in the ring. But it's also the word used for war, because warfare in those days was basically a machete match. Now, we always see movies where Roman soldiers have these long swords and they're going into battle. And sure enough, there were those in the Roman army that had longer swords. And then they had these long staves, which we think of as spears. But the vast majority of foot soldiers, this is what they carried. This is like their regular thing. These guys had to walk everywhere they went, and so they didn't carry every possible kind of weapon, you know. In fact, like archers, all they carried was their archery stuff and this, and then even the guys that were specialty fighters that had the spears or had the long swords, they may have this on their side. But this was kind of like a full kit for most Roman soldiers. You know, they didn't have like a huge pile of stuff because they were on foot. So they had to keep it light. Now the Roman ones were made out of cast iron. This is steel. It's a lot lighter, a lot stronger. It can be sharpened to a finer edge, supposedly. And the reason that I'm even going to talk about this is because in the Bible, it seems that Jesus contradicted himself. He sent all of his apostles out to preach, and he told them, don't bring anything with you. Just go, and you'll stay with whoever invites you in. You'll eat whatever they feed you, so you don't have to bring anything with you. But then as he got close to the end of his ministry, he said, okay, remember how I sent you out with nothing? And I said, just go and stay with whoever. I said, now I'm sending you out like sheep amidst wolves. And so you need to bring some money, and you need to bring a sword. And one of the apostles said, well, we have 2 swords here. And Jesus said, that's enough. So there was 12 of them going out. I think at that time it was 12. May have been 70. There was a time when he sent out 70. But he sent them out with 2 swords. So they weren't going out to engage in warfare, but they needed some basic tool for doing whatever it was that they were going to have to do. And I say a tool because one of the arguments that the churches have in support of why Jesus would tell them to take that is that swords are good for killing snakes. Although I really don't know why you would kill a snake. If you come across a snake and it's a dangerous snake, you just keep going. Another thing is that even the Roman soldiers used these things for butchering meat or for building shelters. You know, they would make themselves a little debris hut by cutting down some sticks and putting a piece of canvas over it. Maybe that's what the apostles were going to do. I can't prove that that's not the case. But he said, I'm sending you out as sheep amongst wolves. So that's the reason he told them to take a sword. So obviously, he was pretty much giving them the go-ahead to defend themselves from people who were violent. And yet, a short time later, Jesus was arrested, and his apostles asked, shall we use our swords against them? And before he could answer, Peter pulled his sword out, and he struck the slave of Malchus and cut his ear off. Well, Jesus promptly picked up the ear, and he put it back on. He fixed it. However, his ear was damaged, he undid the damage. And he said, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Now, the thing to keep in mind is what he actually said was, he who lives by machete dies by machete. And remember, machete is formed from the word match. He who lives by the match dies by the match. So when Jesus sent these apostles out, they were not looking for a fight. They were not trying to overthrow the government. They were simply going out to conduct business in a world full of violent people. And so if at all, they would use the swords to defend themselves, but not against an army. When you defend yourself against an army, you're entering the match. Okay? Now here's the reason this has become important as of late. Whenever I get a comment on my videos, if it's an exceptionally good comment, something that stands out, then I want to find out about the person. And what you do is you just click on their name and it takes you to their YouTube channel. A lot of times there's nothing there. They have a YouTube channel just so they can leave comments, but they don't post videos. Most times they don't even have their favorites in there, nothing. They don't use it for anything except posting comments. But sometimes they have a lot of videos, favorited videos, or videos they've uploaded, and so I get to see what kind of a person I'm dealing with so I can get a better idea of how to respond, because sometimes comments touch my heart so much that I want to talk to these people in person. And so before I say, well, look, here's my Skype name, give me a call, I want to make sure they're safe. Since I've been doing this, we've gone through 2 administrations, the Obama administration, and now we're in the Trump administration. And I guess the very first time I ever posted a video, there was another guy who was president. I don't even remember who it was now, but it was before Trump, or before Obama. And I've never been political, so I don't really pay too much attention to that. I know there are people that are very passionate about the Republicans and people that are very passionate about the Democrats, but I don't think it's ever been like this. Now, under the Obama administration, there were a whole lot of people bad-mouthing Obama, and a lot of my subscribers were bad-mouthing Obama. Now, obviously, presidents deserve to be bad-mouthed because they are, saying that they're going to lead the country to something nice, and the country's never been nice. And so they're obviously liars, all of them. But most of what I saw was just racism. The United States of America had always had a white president, and suddenly we had a black president, and so most of the people who hated Obama hated him because he was black. It wasn't because of anything he did, because for a long time he really didn't do anything. So it was nothing to judge him on. He was just like any other president. He stood in front of a camera, he gave speeches, nothing happened. But as he got closer to the end of his administration, he was supposedly the founder of this new healthcare system, which has put 90% of the country in abject poverty. And so at that point, he really did do something bad. But did he? The new president got in by promising a whole lot of stuff, but one of the main things he promised was to end Obamacare, which he never did. And if you ask somebody who worships the new president why their president didn't remove Obamacare, they have some kind of a political excuse. And the reality is, if you can make an excuse for why this president can't get rid of Obamacare, that same exact excuse could be used for the last president and why he couldn't have created Obamacare. Every single policy that this country has is driven by the insanely evil and the insanely wealthy, and they have to have someone as a figurehead to stand up in front of a camera and announce the vile things that they're doing. They don't care if it's a Republican, they don't care if it's a Democrat. They just need somebody that the nation acknowledges as their rightful ruler. Now, the problem I'm having today is that not everybody is just saying that this guy, Trump, is a bad person or a bad president or whatever. There are actually people that are saying he's a good president. And it's not just that they're saying this. These people are becoming more and more violent. They're becoming more and more weaponized and more militarized. The divide between what they call conservatives, which is normally associated with the Republicans, and the liberals, which is normally associated with the Democrats, is getting larger than I have ever seen it before. I said I didn't pay attention to politics way back in the ancient past, but even in recent times with Obama, the divide was not as bad as it is now. And nothing's really changed. It's just somehow the authority of the spirit of the air is moving people to become more divided. And, fortunately, when I go on to, when somebody leaves a very touching comment on my channel, when I go there, it's very rare that the person has left information in support of any of the political parties. Because most of my subscribers, I think, are spiritually enlightened, and they know that that's all a farce, okay? But we're going to look at the political parties that existed in Jesus' day, because they are exactly the same political parties we have in our day. Our world today is run by a policy called Zionism. As the word Zionism in the Bible, the actual original word, means scorched earth or burnt place. And so that's what Zionism is. It's the policy to destroy the planet. And the only one that would be behind such a policy is Satan. But Zionism still exists. And the people who were in charge of Zionism thousands of years ago are the same people in charge of it now. You know, it's the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, and not necessarily biological, but there is a connection between the earliest Zionist and the Zionists today. Spiritual, physical, whatever. There's a direct line of descent. So we're going to look at this word that, like the word party that we use, a political party. You know, and that's not just for Democrats and Republicans. You know, we had the Socialist Party, the Nazi Party. There's always some kind of a party. Well, that's formed from the word part. Like this area, this is a partial of land, right? That's formed from the word part. Political party, that's formed from the word part. A part of a car, you know, that is the word part. And in the Bible, it's the same way. The word used is meros, M-E-R-O-S. It's Strong's G3313. Strong's G3313. And in several verses, in speaking of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the word part is used. And some Bibles just leave it as part. But some Bibles actually translate it as party. The party of the Pharisees were at odds with the party of the Sadducees. And so this is the case. Back in that day, the Pharisees and Sadducees didn't like each other, even though they were both Jews. You would think that their common enemy would be Rome, but they were actually an established, acknowledged system of the Roman Empire. You know, the Pharisees and Sadducees we think of as priests, different kinds of priests, but that's not the case. Pharisees and Sadducees were just the general public, just like during World War II. You had the Nazis. Well, the Nazis were not just the political leaders. That was the political party. You know, when we think of Nazis, we think of stormtroopers or we think of the SS. That's not the case. The Nazis were everybody who believed in that system. The same way with Democrats and Republicans. We might think of the congressmen and the presidents as Democrats and Republicans, but that's not the case. We know that people who support them are also considered Democrats and Republicans. Well, this word, and I'll give you a couple of scriptures to look at, when it speaks of the party of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, one example is at Psalms 23:6, and just a few verses after that is 23:9. And this is when Paul is being tried by these people. And he says, you know, I am a Pharisee of a Pharisee, and I've always supported the resurrection. And suddenly, the Pharisees were all like, well, this man is innocent. And all the Sadducees were, kill him, because that's the way two-party systems always work. They never agree on anything, and they don't care. Neither party cares about the difference between right or wrong. All they care about is supporting their party, their half of the war. You know, it's just basically a version of racism that isn't based on race, although sometimes that plays a part. Now, when we look at the Roman version of government, it is not any different than our own version of government. You know, we've got federal courts, and then beneath that is the state courts, and then there's county courts and city courts. Well, the Sadducees were like the county court. They represented the Jewish version of the legal system, and they had their rights were restricted. So that's why when the Jews decided to kill Jesus, they had to go to the higher authority because they didn't have the right to do executions. They had to get the Romans to do an execution. And the thing is, Jesus hadn't broken any Roman law, but they killed him anyway because that's the way law works. Always the good guy loses and the bad guys win. Whoever has the most weapons and the most money wins. Always. And that's the way it is today. So the Sanhedrin, the court that existed back then, was not a religious court. It was a governmental body. The Sadducees and the Pharisees were just two parties that existed at that time, and the Sanhedrin was made up of politicians who were Sadducees and politicians who were Pharisees. Now, like in our day, one is always perceived as wicked. You know, to this day, we think of the Pharisees as worse than the Sadducees. They were more warlike, they were more demanding, they were more restrictive, they were more sticklers to the rules. The Sadducees didn't seem to be that way. But that's by design, you know. Other ways that we think of these people are as left-wing and right-wing. So what are those attached to? You know, a bird does not fly with one wing. You got to have both. So people have to believe that they are gods. And knowing that there's 7 billion people on this earth, that most people don't aspire to rule over all 7 billion. But if they can rule over half, they're happy. And so they go down and vote for the people that have the kind of rules they like, even though all of those rules are fiction. If we look at our own version of good guys and bad guys, good cop, bad cop, Democrat, Republican, conservatives, and the liberals. If you have, okay, this is the thing. The Pharisees, or the conservatives, are always perceived as warlike. And so when you have a conservative president, that's a Republican president, and he's backed up by a Republican Congress, a Republican Senate, all Republican mayors, Republican dog catcher, Republican people, then the whole planet's at war and people are being slaughtered left and right without any thought about right and wrong. So you would think that the more kinder, gentler version of politics, you know, the liberals, if you could get those in there, the war would decrease. So when you've got a liberal president and liberal Congress, liberal, all of those different offices are liberal, what happens? Nothing. Because anyone involved in a political party is going to be selfish. And so warfare goes on at the same exact rate. We can look at this country or this world historically, and we can examine every single thing that happened according to who was in charge at the time, and the number of deaths due to warfare never go down. They increase year by year. They're always unnecessary. It's always mostly civilians that are murdered, and nobody cares. If you associate yourself with a political party, you're being a part of a murder, because whether you choose to have liberals commit murder or conservatives to commit murder or to command that those murders take place, you are a murderer. But that's not even what this video is about, because there's a third group here. Now, you might automatically be thinking of the third political candidate that's always thrown in there, like the Ron Pauls, the independents. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about another group that existed in the ancient past that still exists today. And those are the people that recognize that the two-party system of government is a fiction and that it's filthy, and they want nothing to do with it. Well, that should be everybody. You know, anybody with any common sense should know that the liberals are wicked and the Republicans are wicked. But how far do you take it? Peter knew they were wicked. And so Peter decided to take them on. Because when he was arrested, you know who arrested him? It was the Jewish court. It was the soldiers, or the county soldiers, the cops, that came out to arrest him. So when he pulled his sword and cut off the ear of the slave of Malchus, he was taking a stand against the acknowledged, the recognized government. When Jesus was killed, it says that he was killed as a thief, or that he was executed along with a thief on either side of him. Well, that's not true. The word used there is lestus, or lestus, which we're supposed to believe is a plunderer. But in the ancient past, this word was used mostly to describe insurgents, rebels, people taking a stand against the government. When Jesus was killed, he wasn't killed next to thieves. The word for thief is kleptos, which is where we get our word kleptomaniac. And that word is used in the Bible. So this word lestus has to be different than the word kleptos. If you acknowledge or you recognize that the two-party system is evil, and you separate yourself from that, you're making God happy. But if you take up your sword, just like Jesus said, those who live by the sword die by the sword. And remember, the word sword is actually macheta, formed from the word match, When Jesus told those people to get some swords and keep them, he may have been telling them to, use that to make shelter or use that to prepare meals. But it seems likely that he was telling them to use that to defend yourself from violent people who are individuals. People that were there to beat them up and take their money. Not to defend themselves from the government. When they used their machetes against the government, they were entering into the match. Look at history with an open mind. There's been a lot of revolutions, and the people that teach history, the people who follow history, believe those revolutions brought something better. But in each and every case, the established government, which was wicked, which was overthrown, was replaced by another wicked established government. The founding fathers of this country kind of gave the war a head start, the Revolutionary War, with the Boston Tea Party. What they don't teach you in school, but what is true and can be confirmed, is that it was just rich people that threw that tea over. The tax was minimal, was not even enough to cover the cost of bringing the tea into the country. But those very same men that threw the tea into the waters after the Revolution took over the tea industry, and they raised the tax exponentially. They became wealthy not just on the sale of the tea, but just on the tax on the tea alone. Revolutionaries do not improve Satan's empire. If somehow your revolution appeases Satan to the point that he gives you his command over his empire, you can only run the empire the way Satan wants you to run the empire. We are about to witness the greatest event in human history. A revolt against Satan's empire by the Creator. And we already know how the war is going to work out. And when it's done, Jesus Christ will be the established ruler of the earth, and Satan will be exiled. Anything else that we attempt on our own between now and then is just going to be an extension of Satan's empire. If you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.